The disappearance. First Officer Calaxia stood at the observation deck of the Confederation flagship Eternal Wisdom, her four eyes blinking in sequence as she studied the holographic display. The Confederation's databanks labeled humans as Class 3 sentients, physically unimpressive, technologically rudimentary, but with unusual cognitive patterns. Their admission to the Galactic Confederation had been controversial. Many senior representatives considered them too volatile, too unpredictable. Still obsessing over the primates, First Officer. Ambassador Threll's voice came from behind her, his translucent membrane shimmering with faint bioluminescence. Not obsessing, Ambassador. Studying. Calaxia replied without turning. There's something about them that doesn't align with our models. Threll made a dismissive gesture with three of his appendages. They're simple creatures who lucked into spaceflight before they were ready, endearing in their enthusiasm, perhaps, but hardly worth this level of scrutiny. The humans had joined the Confederation only 30 standard cycles ago. They brought little of value, no revolutionary technology, no strategic resources unique to their world. What they did bring was an insatiable curiosity and an alarming tolerance for risk. Human scientists worked tirelessly in Confederation research facilities, asking questions that other species considered irrelevant or even dangerous. Have you read their historical archives? Calaxia asked. Skimmed them. Brutal, primitive stuff. Like all young species, Threll replied. Yes, but the timeline, Ambassador. They went from primitive combustion flight to breaking their planetary gravity well in less than a century. From splitting the atom to quantum communication in mere generations. That acceleration curve is unprecedented. Threll's membrane pulsed with amber light, the equivalent of a shrug. Statistical anomaly. Nothing more. Their conversation was interrupted by the sudden appearance of High Commander Vex, his carapace gleaming under the light of the observation deck. The insectoid commander rarely left the strategic center of the vessel, and his presence immediately signaled something significant. First Officer, Ambassador. Vex's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. The long-range sensors have detected something approaching from the galactic rim. The Void Eaters, Calaxia asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. For centuries, the Confederation had been monitoring the slow approach of an extragalactic force they called the Void Eaters, a swarm of biomechanical entities that consumed entire star systems, leaving only dead space in their wake. The estimates had always shown them arriving in another 3 centuries. Plenty of time for the Confederation to prepare. Yes, Vex confirmed. But the timeline has changed. They've accelerated. Current projections show them reaching our outer systems within 30 cycles. The news spread quickly throughout the Confederation. Emergency councils were convened, defense strategies were debated, evacuation plans were considered and rejected. In the midst of this growing panic, the human delegates requested an emergency address before the full Confederation Assembly. The human ambassador, Dr. Elena Reyes, stood before the assembled representatives of 500 species. Unlike the panicked debates of the previous days, she spoke with an unsettling calm. Distinguished delegates of the Galactic Confederation, we have analyzed the data on the approaching threat. We have studied your historical records of previous encounters with the Void Eaters. We have concluded that conventional defense strategies will fail. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Therefore, effective immediately, humanity is withdrawing from Confederation space. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some species interpreted this as abandonment, others as cowardice. A few suspected treachery. This is not abandonment, Dr. Rice continued when the chamber quieted. This is strategic redeployment. We will return when we are ready. Within 1 standard cycle, every human in Confederation space had departed. Their modest fleet of vessels, previously considered barely adequate for interstellar travel, disappeared into the uncharted regions beyond the galactic arm. They took with them only what they could carry, leaving behind settlements, research facilities, and diplomatic outposts. The Confederation's attempts to track them failed. Their communications went unanswered. As the standard cycles passed, the humans became first a mystery, then a legend, and finally an afterthought as the Confederation faced the approaching horror of the Void Eaters. Calaxia had risen to become High Commander by the time the first wave of Void Eaters reached the outer systems. The Confederation had spent 30 cycles preparing, building defenses, developing new weapons. But as the first colonies fell, a terrible truth became apparent. Nothing they had built could stop the invaders. "They don't even communicate," Calaxia said, watching the tactical display as another defense outpost went dark. "They don't demand surrender. They don't take prisoners. They simply consume." The Void Eaters had no recognizable ships, only massive organic mechanical structures that engulfed entire planets, breaking them down into their component elements. Conventional weapons barely slowed them. Energy weapons were absorbed. Planetary shields delayed the inevitable by mere days. As the Confederation forces retreated system by system, Calaxia ordered the formation of a last defensive line at Threll's star, named for the now-deceased ambassador. The entire remaining Confederation fleet gathered, over 10,000 vessels representing the combined might of 500 species. "This is where we make our stand," Calaxia announced to the fleet. "If we fall here, the core worlds fall next." The massive swarm of Void Eaters emerged from hyperspace, not the hundreds they had faced before, but thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. The tactical computers couldn't even provide an accurate count. As the endless wave approached, a strange silence fell over the Confederation command. "It was always going to end this way," someone whispered. Calaxia was about to give the order to engage when every sensor array on the flagship suddenly overloaded. Space itself seemed to ripple and tear, and where there had been empty void behind the Confederation fleet, something impossible appeared. Ships, if they could even be called ships. Structures the size of small moons, gleaming with a metal that seemed to absorb and redirect light itself. Dozens of them, arranged in a formation that no Confederation tactician would recognize. "Impossible," Calaxia breathed. Nothing that large could be built, let alone move through hyperspace. The communication system activated without any input from the Confederation crew. "Confederation fleet, this is Admiral Helena Reyes of the Earth Defense Force. Hold your position. We will handle this." The name struck Calaxia like a physical blow. Reyes, the same surname as the human ambassador from 30 cycles ago. A descendant, or could it be? "Identify yourselves fully," Calaxia demanded, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "We are humanity," came the reply, "and we have returned as promised." The return. The human vessels moved with impossible grace for their size, forming a barrier between the Confederation fleet and the approaching Void Eaters. What happened next defied the understanding of even the most advanced Confederation scientists. The human ships didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, the space between them began to distort, as if reality itself was being manipulated. The Void Eaters, previously relentless in their advance, hesitated. "They're afraid," Threll's successor, Ambassador Krell, whispered in awe. "I didn't think they could feel fear." The lead human vessel opened a direct channel to Calaxia's flagship. The face that appeared on the screen was unmistakably human, but with subtle differences that made Calaxia blink all 4 eyes in sequence. The skin had a faint metallic sheen. And the eyes seemed to hold stars within them. "High Commander Calaxia," the human said. "I am Admiral Helena Reyes." Yes, the same Helena Reyes who stood before the Confederation 30 cycles ago. "Impossible," Calaxia replied. "Human lifespans err. What they were and what they are now are different matters." Reyes interrupted. "We've changed, High Commander. We had to." Before Calaxia could respond, the tactical display showed movement. The Void Eaters had recovered from their initial hesitation and were advancing again, this time with a focused determination toward the human vessels. "We'll explain everything later," Reyes said. "For now, Pull your fleet back to the following coordinates. What's about to happen isn't safe for conventional vessels. Calaxia wanted to object, to assert the Confederation's authority in this space, but decades of strategic command had taught her to recognize when she was outmatched. She gave the order, and the Confederation fleet began its retreat to the designated coordinates. What followed would be described in 1,000 different ways by 1,000 different species, yet no description truly captured it. The human vessels did not fight in any conventional sense. They sang. That was how many would later describe it, a song that rippled through subspace, carried not by communications arrays but by some fundamental force of reality itself. The song spoke of endurance, of defiance, of a determination that transcended mere survival. And the Void Eaters responded, not with retreat but with rage. They swarmed the human vessels, their consumption mechanisms operating at full capacity. Where Confederation shields had failed within hours, the human defenses held. More than held, they reflected the consuming energy back upon the attackers. What are we seeing? Ambassador Krell demanded. What technology is this? One of the Confederation science officers, a Malurian with specialized knowledge in theoretical physics, spoke up. It's not technology, Ambassador. At least, not in any way we understand it. They're manipulating the quantum fabric itself. For 3 days, the battle raged. The human vessels never broke formation, never retreated, never showed signs of weakening. The Void Eaters, for the first time in recorded history, began to fall back. On the 4th day, Admiral Reyes requested a meeting aboard the Confederation flagship. When she arrived, the differences in her appearance became even more apparent. She moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost predatory, and subtle patterns of light shifted beneath her skin. You're not fully organic anymore, Calaxia observed as they sat in the flagship's conference chamber. No, Reyes agreed. We're not. Necessity drove us to transcend our original limitations. The changes in your appearance are the least of what we've become, Reyes finished. We knew 30 cycles ago that conventional means wouldn't stop the Void Eaters. We needed to understand them at a fundamental level, and to do that, we needed to evolve. Evolve? In 30 cycles? Reyes smiled, an expression that didn't quite reach those star-filled eyes. When you face extinction, impossible becomes merely difficult. We left Confederation space not in cowardice, but because we needed freedom from your regulatory oversight. The changes we needed to make to ourselves would have violated every bioethical principle in the Confederation Charter. What did you do to yourselves? Ambassador Krell asked, his membrane pulsing with a mixture of fascination and horror. We merged with our technology. We rewrote our genetics. We extended our consciousness into the quantum substrate. Reyes spoke matter-of-factly, as if describing routine upgrades to a spacecraft. Most importantly, we studied the Void Eaters. We captured specimens. We learned their language. Language? Calaxia interrupted. They communicate. Everything communicates, High Commander. The Void Eaters speak through quantum entanglement. Their language is the manipulation of probability fields. What you witnessed was us speaking back to them in terms they understand. The implications were staggering. For centuries, the Confederation had treated the Void Eaters as a natural disaster, an unthinking force like a supernova or a black hole. The idea that they could be communicated with, reasoned with, perhaps even negotiated with, changed everything. Will they retreat permanently? Calaxia asked. Reyes's expression darkened. No. We've won a battle, not the war. They're retreating to regroup, to adapt. They consider this galaxy their rightful feeding ground, and they've traveled too far to give up easily. Then what hope do we have? Us, Reyes said simply. Humanity. We've made ourselves into the perfect countermeasure. While you built bigger guns and stronger shields, we remade ourselves into something the Void Eaters have never encountered. A species that can match their adaptability, their connection to the quantum fabric, but with something they lack. And what is that? Ambassador Krell asked. Purpose beyond consumption, Rise replied. The Void Eaters exist only to feed and expand. We exist to protect, to preserve, to understand. That fundamental difference gives us an edge they can't match. As if to punctuate her words, the tactical display showed the last of the Void Eater swarm retreating into hyperspace. The immediate threat had passed, but Calaxia knew better than to celebrate prematurely. What happens now? She asked Rise. Now we prepare. The Void Eaters will return with new adaptations, new strategies, and we'll be waiting. We, Calaxia pressed. You mean humans? I mean all of us, Rise replied. The Confederation has resources, knowledge, perspectives we need. And now that you've seen what we've become, perhaps you understand why we couldn't simply explain our plan 30 cycles ago. Calaxia studied the transformed human before her, seeing both the familiar and the utterly alien. The Confederation had dismissed humans as simple, unimpressive creatures who had achieved spaceflight before their time. How catastrophically wrong that assessment had been. Admiral Reyes, Calaxia said formally, on behalf of the Galactic Confederation, I formally request humanity's readmission to our alliance. Reyes smiled, and this time, the expression reached her eyes. High Commander, we never truly left. We just had to take a different path for a while. The Sentinels, the Void Eaters, returned 18 standard cycles later. By then, the relationship between humanity and the Confederation had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. Humans shared some of their advancements, particularly in quantum communications and energy generation, while maintaining strict control over the technologies that had transformed their species. We're not withholding knowledge out of mistrust, Admiral Reyes explained to the Confederation Council. The process that transformed us would destroy most other sentient species. Our genetic structure and neurological systems were uniquely suited to this particular form of enhancement. Some members of the Council suspected this was not the full truth, but the memory of humanity's decisive intervention against the Void Eaters kept objections to a minimum. Besides, even the limited technologies humans were willing to share had advanced Confederation science by centuries. The warning came through the quantum network that now connected all major Confederation systems. The Void Eaters had been detected approaching from a different vector, one that would bring them to the densely populated core worlds within days. They're learning, Rise told Calaxia, who had remained High Commander despite the traditional term limits of her position. They're avoiding the defensive perimeter we established. How many? Calaxia asked. More than before. Much more. They'd been consuming systems outside our detection range, building their numbers. The combined human Confederation fleet moved to intercept. The human vessels, now numbering in the hundreds, formed the vanguard, while the Confederation ships provided support. As the enemy emerged from hyperspace, even veterans of the previous encounter felt their resolve waver. The Void Eaters had changed. Where before they were massive but relatively simple structures, now they displayed complex geometries that seemed to bend the light around them. Their approach was coordinated, purposeful. They've developed intelligence, one of the human captains observed. Or perhaps they always had it, and now they're showing it. The battle that followed would later be known as the Luminance Confrontation. The Void Eaters no longer simply absorbed energy. They redirected it, creating cascading waves of destructive force that overwhelmed several human vessels in the opening minutes. Admiral Rice's flagship, the Sentinel Prime, moved to the center of the formation. All Confederation vessels, maintain your distance. All human vessels, prepare for synchronization. What happened next defied description in conventional language. The human vessels began to merge, not physically, but energetically. Quantum fields overlapped and reinforced each other, creating a single unified consciousness spread across hundreds of vessels and thousands of transformed humans. From the perspective of the Confederation fleet, it appeared as if a new star had been born in the void between worlds. Light and energy spiraled around the human formation, coalescing into patterns of impossible complexity. The Void Eaters responded with equal intensity. The space between the opposing forces became a churning maelstrom of quantum interactions, probability collapsing and reforming at rates that made the fabric of space-time itself groan under the strain. "We can't maintain tactical observation," reported Calaxia's sensor officer. "The quantum fluctuations are too intense." For 3 days, the cosmic battle raged, visible to inhabited systems light years away as strange auroras and gravitational anomalies. Confederation scientists later calculated that the energy expended during the confrontation exceeded the total output of a medium-sized star over its entire lifetime. When the quantum storm finally subsided, the battlefield was transformed. Where once there had been empty space, now a nebula of exotic particles drifted, glowing with colors that had no names in any Confederation language. "Status report," Calaxia demanded. "The Void Eaters are gone," came the uncertain reply. "Completely. Not retreated, but converted somehow. Only 67 of the human vessels remained, drifting silently." When communications were finally reestablished, Admiral Rice's voice came through, weaker but resolute. "We found the answer," she said. "Not destruction, but transformation. We've rewritten their fundamental purpose." The explanation came later, in a joint session of the Confederation Council. The humans had discovered that the Void Eaters were not truly malevolent. They were tools, created by a long-vanished civilization from another galaxy. Their purpose had been to harvest resources and return them, but with their creators gone, they had continued their programming without purpose or end. "We couldn't destroy them," Rice explained. "Their connection to the quantum substrate is too fundamental. But we could rewrite their purpose. They're still out there, still consuming, but now they're creating as well, seeding barren systems with the building blocks of life, establishing equilibrium rather than extinction." The cost had been high. Thousands of transformed humans had sacrificed themselves, their consciousness absorbed into the quantum matrix to guide the reprogramming of the Void Eaters. Those who survived were changed even further, their connection to their original humanity grown ever more tenuous. In the cycles that followed, humanity withdrew from daily participation in Confederation affairs. They established outposts at the galaxy's edge, monitoring the deep void between galaxies for new threats. They called themselves Sentinels now, not humans, guardians of a boundary most species never even considered. Calaxia, in the final entry of her personal log before retirement, wrote, "We misunderstood them from the beginning. We thought them primitive, unready for the cosmos. In truth, they were the only species prepared to face it, not through superior technology or biological advantage, but through their unique capacity for transformation. They became what the galaxy needed them to be, sacrificing their very nature in the process. We called them humans. History will remember them as sentinels. I suspect neither term truly captures what they have become." A century later, a young Confederation researcher named Threll, named after the long-dead ambassador, detected an unusual signal from the galactic rim. Following it to its source, his small research vessel encountered a massive structure orbiting a dying star. A voice spoke directly into his mind as he approached. "Welcome, Seeker. I was human once. Now I am the Watcher. What knowledge do you pursue?" Throughout the galaxy, similar encounters occurred. The Sentinels had spread themselves across the cosmos, becoming living repositories of knowledge, guardians against cosmic threats, guides for emerging civilizations. No longer confined to physical forms, they existed as patterns in the quantum foam, as echoes in the cosmic background radiation, as whispers in the dreams of 1,000 species. The species once dismissed as simple, unready primates had become the caretakers of the galaxy itself. And in the void between galaxies, the transformed Void Eaters continued their new purpose, building rather than consuming, creating rather than destroying, guided by the sacrifice of those who had once called Earth home. The end.